All right, without any further ado, I'm going to let Katie Delmez introduce herself a bit. And we all have been so, we impressed to have the Frist Art Museum curator looking at our work. And we're eager to hear kind of your thoughts about what it was like developing the show. And let me just say this before I turn it over to Katie. We also have Katie's suggestion was to invite Carrie Mills to join us too, because so much of a show is the way it's hung, the way the photos are grouped and how they talk to each other. And so Carrie's also on the program with us. And after Katie gives a little bit of introduction, Carrie will give a bit of introduction about her thoughts on hanging the show. And then we'll go through each of the photos that are in the show and have a chance to talk about them. Sound good? All right, Katie.
Emily, this is Lee. One suggestion, would you go ahead and mute everybody? Because your audio was breaking up, and I think it's because we have so many microphones open.
Well, okay, everybody mute yourself except for Katie and Carrie.
Okay.
I'll mute you if you don't.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. My name is Katie Delmez, and as Emily mentioned, I'm a curator at the Frist Art Museum. I've actually been there for since we opened, so it's hard to believe that means almost 20 years, but it's really been an honor to have the chance to look at your works, and it's been an interest. I have done some juried work before, but in a slightly different format. And so as Emily and I, when we were talking about this last week, it's been interesting to be in a position to kind of, I've never had to like explain or like justify my selections. And so I just thought maybe I would give you a little bit more of a background on my work and what we do at the museum, in hopes that maybe that would kind of explain or help you all to understand a little bit about what I did for this project. So normally when I'm organizing an exhibition for the Frist, if I'm working with a living artist and we're doing what we call, a monographic show, just a one-person exhibition, then we work really closely together to decide what kind of exhibition we want to do. Is this a broad survey like the exhibition we did on Carrie Mae Weems in 2012, which was really like a massive look at her entire career over the last 30 years? Or do we want to focus in on just one body of work, say, as we did with the project in 18 with Keith McCormick and Chandra, Keith Calhoun and Chandra McCormick with their exhibition looking at the photographs that they took of Angola prison. And that, when you're working with a living artist, it's a very collaborative process. Or sometimes if I'm organizing an exhibition that's a group show, I have kind of a thematic idea in mind that I'm wanting to kind of explore through different works of art, and then I kind of reach out to the artist or to the gallery and select works that kind of fit within that conceptual premise. So just kind of like picking works out of a Dropbox folder is a little, there isn't as much context as what I'm normally used to. So that is where, when Emily and I were talking about, for me, if I were doing something like this in a like normal state, certainly a non-COVID situation, I would definitely want to, have an idea behind the exhibition. I would want to be a part of the layout. That's as Liz Berger knows, one of our trusted docents who's been with us from the beginning, how we lay out an exhibition is really important. Just kind of the unfolding of the narrative is important. And then of course the written interpretation, the job of a curator is to, in addition to selecting the objects and kind of the big idea behind an exhibition, we also want to provide some written ideas and connecting points between the works of art for the audience. So in this case, I feel like I've done just like a tiny little bit of what I would normally do, and like I said, I'm just a little bit, you know, I'm not usually in the position of having to defend my selections or explain them, because usually it's a collaborative process. So I just kind of want to get that out there. And there were so many amazing photographs that, it was really hard to make these decisions, and all of them certainly were worthy of being in an exhibition. So it was a real pleasure to get the chance to look at those, especially right now when obviously we're all living in such a weird, uncertain time. I think we all agree that like art and photography, especially, I feel like, is an opportunity for connection. And that's why I suggested that why don't we, give, there isn't a theme for this show necessarily, but certainly I'm a curator that's, always been interested in work that addresses social and political issues and content. I mean, that's in my mind, there are beautiful pictures that I enjoy just looking at on a wall, but for my curatorial practice especially, I'm interested in works that really kind of challenge how we think and how we kind of see the world, and how that, maybe we can use art to be a bridge to foster connections and to kind of see more about how other people might think or live. So that was kind of an idea that I thought would be important for this show. But of course, at the end of the day, I'm always interested, and I'm going to select works that have high aesthetic merit, and that are just, that they please not just my eye, but or the please not just my mind, but also my eye. They need to be really beautiful works of art. That's really important too. So, so that is what I did, is I looked through things. I mean, obviously this has been a year like no other in my lifetime. And as I seek the wisdom of the elders of other generations, I keep hearing more than maybe I want to hear that they've never experienced anything like this either. And it just seems kind of flat-footed to not, in the art community, to be making art and to be showing art that is a way for us all to kind of express some of the, whether it's the unease, the stress, the sorrow, the grief, there's so much that's happening, right? The silver linings, there are opportunities within this very unpredictable and unsettling moment as well. So that's kind of what I was thinking about as I was looking at these photographs, as which ones speak to this moment, the hard parts, the good parts, but then also, as you'll see, there were some works that just kind of transcended that, and I think that's important too for all of us to, we can't ignore what's happening right now, but we all need breaks and opportunities just to take a deep breath and to enjoy enjoy beautiful things, whether that's the visual arts or music or Hamilton on our flat screen TV that's on Disney Plus. We all need opportunities to let the arts feed our souls. So that was also a part of my selecting process. So with that kind of backdrop of my selecting process, I did have the opportunity to go out and see the installation. And Carrie, I think you did a great job. We haven't met yet, but hi.
Hi, thank you.
And yeah, and there were definitely some, walls, as I would call it, that I was like, yes, this is exactly what I would have done. And there were some others that I was like, that's not what I would have done. I wonder what the mindset was behind that. So Emily, did you say that you want Carrie to talk and then to go back to the images, or for me to talk about the images and then for Carrie to talk?
Well, I think it might be good to do an overview now. Carrie sent me some photos she took of each of the walls.
Oh, great.
So Carrie, I'll pull that up. I'll share my screen. And and let you just kind of introduce yourself and talk through it. Let's see, share screen. And it wants to know what I want to share. Oh, here we go. The PowerPoint allows Zoom to share it. Sorry. There were more choices there than I've.
Well, I can start speaking while you, if that's okay, while you're setting it up.
That'd be good.
Okay. So, well, hello everybody, and I was honored to be asked tonight. So thank you so much, and it's great to meet you, Katie. Thank you for asking me to be part of tonight's presentation. And many of you I've known or met through the years, and I've been showing the SNAP group for now, I don't know, I'm losing count. I've been curating the galleries at the J for 14 or 15 years now. I'm not a person of like exact figures. I'm more of a feel person. And so I don't even know how many, I didn't look it up to see how many years I've been doing that, but I've been at the J for 17 years working there. And I kind of came in back through the back door of being a curator, through the door of, I walked from being an artist into being a curator. I was part of the Plowhouse galleries back in the day in the East, I was gonna say the East Village, but in East Nashville. And from there, I went, that closed and our gallery opened up to, they needed somebody. I just said, I'll do it, because I had never run a gallery before I was involved with Plowhouse. So that's how I came into that, if any of you didn't know that. So I'm also an active artist as well. So I'm kind of walking two worlds. But so now that I've been at the galleries at the J for so long, I feel like I've come to have like a relationship with the building for sure. And I feel like I have these conversations with the walls every month when the art comes in, because the walls kind of work against each other. And I'm always trying to have to keep that in mind. And especially being aware when somebody comes in, what's the impact? What's the intention right away? And so it's interesting that, Katie, that you brought up there were things that you loved and things you didn't love, because I always find with a group show, there's a lot of challenges. And especially this time there was, because usually I don't break up. SNAP is usually an ongoing flow from the first gallery that leads into the one right next to it. And I didn't have that luxury this time. And so I had to break up the show into like the other part of the building, which was not, it's not to me, it made it a little bit more complicated for me this time. And especially, usually with most group shows, there's going to be usually a lot of different themes and so much to consider, like so much on in a visual story to consider. Also, I, as a curator, Katie, when you were speaking, I've kind of known this, but I really have kept away as a curator from using a lot of verbiage to connect the shows or the exhibits that I put up. It's really just almost all visual, except with usually just some information about the artist. And so I've kind of created, the galleries in a way that I work with the galleries in just a really purely visual sense.
So Carrie,
Yeah.
can everybody see the screen? I think I figured out how to share it.
Yeah, okay, so did you want me to stop?
And here's the first wall.
Okay, yeah, so
And can I just interrupt for 1 second, Carrie?
Oh yeah.
If I can just slight nuance of the words, I didn't say there were some walls I didn't love. There were some that piqued my curiosity, because I was like, that's not what I would have done. And I was honestly just curious to know what you thought. It's not that I like disagreed. It was just like, I can't wait to hear like what those meant for you, the connections there were, because I think that like curatorial work is so subjective. It is so like what you're seeing. And I might see it one way and somebody else might see it another way. So this has been for me a really interesting like collaboration, even though we haven't met until now.
I know, and I'm so curious to see I would have, loved to know where you would have done things differently too, because that's always so informative for me as a curator. So, and I love collaborating. So
Me too.
I am so like curious, like, I'm like, oh my God, I wonder how she would have, done this or seen this. So that being said, I mean, immediately, the way I process, and I basically like to hang the galleries by myself. I like to lay all the work out and then just walk and look and just absorb what I see and what I feel. And I look for the story. So even though I did see the photographs beforehand, I didn't even go into that process, because to me, it's such a in the moment, intuitive process that that's how I like to work. I like to put music on. And I like to, because there's something when I have music on that moves my brain into a different sphere as well. And so I put music on and I just walk around and look at the pictures and start to see what themes are happening. And usually I just stop moving pictures without even like getting too cerebral. I just stop pulling and I see that start to fall into a certain way. But I'm very aware of the story. I want the story and the feeling are the big things for me. I want somebody to walk in and be pulled into a story. So, and the theme that I guess I started off with, which was this year, was of isolation. And so the first wall, and the galleries, when I'm doing the galleries, especially the first wall, I always have to decide when I see the work, is it going to be like, am I going to go with impact with color? Like, it's I have to see the work and then I kind of know what I need to do. And sometimes I'll actually I'll lay two walls out and I'll just reverse them, because I'm like, oh, like that's the first paragraph in the song and that's the second, or, in the story. So, but I'm always considering color as well. And so there's so many things, color, balance, like there's so many things and then the connection, it's always the connection. So there's the story, the feeling, the connection, and the theme. And so I started with the isolation, and that's where I pulled all the pictures that gave me the feeling of isolation. And then once I had those, and then I'm limited in that wall. I don't like to usually double play, like put one above the other. It's very rare that I do that. So I just had to edit. I had to keep editing and to the pictures that I felt really flowed in that feeling of isolation and led one into the other. And so the story begins there. And then, but I'm also aware when somebody comes into the gallery, their eye can go to the left, but their eye can go to the right. So I have to be aware what's happening on that right wall, right to the right when somebody's walking in. And the gallery is a feeling as a whole. So it's like, what's the impact of the gallery? And what's that second wall? Like, you're already getting a glance of the second wall. You're getting a glance of all the walls. So they all have to work, like it's almost like a mathematical equation. And I also have to consider the symmetry of the sizes of everything. So there's a lot to work with. And when I'm dealing with, especially a group show, even though I'm so grateful these were all black frames, because when they're not, sometimes I feel like I'm gonna have a nervous breakdown. So I was considering the symmetry and then even where I put the pedestals, like, so I didn't know I was gonna have a mask show really until that kind of came in secondhand, which actually worked with this show. But the pedestals kind of anchor the galleries as well. So once I get the show up, I'm considering what am I going to do, if anything, with the pedestals, and what am I going to put on them, if anything. So that always comes into play as well. Those are usually afterwards. So I usually get the walls going. So the second wall, if you want to back up for a minute, if you don't mind.
Previous, there we go.
Yeah. So this second wall now it went from isolation, just like the year did, into the protests. Mm-hmm. And community and how we as a city are feeling community. And so that was where the second wall started. It just happens naturally. I don't even think it's weird because sometimes I don't even feel like I'm thinking this, I'm just feeling it. But that's where, when I really looked at what I was doing, I started to say, oh yeah, that's what's happening here. And so that's the second wall led into that. And now I had to also edit out, I couldn't put all the pictures, and I knew I had the other side of the building. So while I'm doing this, I'm thinking, okay, how's the other side of the building going to work? Because that gallery has to work as well on its own. but also be part of this show. So it was challenging to pull out pictures that might have been gone really well with this second wall and then put them into the other side of the building. And so there was that challenge. I felt that was a really big challenge for me in this show, because there were definitely pictures that went into that second gallery, into the Sig Hell gallery, that I think would have been a good continuation of this, but I didn't want to overload the walls, especially the walls opposite, which I could have put like groupings of 4 or 5. But I also had to consider those walls needed to stay symmetrical to me. And if I put 1 with 5 and so there was all this balancing act to consider. So here's the opposite walls to the first 2 walls. The wall on the wall on the left that you're seeing with the church and the figure in the reflection, that's opposite the second wall actually when you walk in, and the other one was opposite the first. But so I guess what I'm summing up is that all the story and the balance of the gallery are all a consideration when I'm working, and as somebody's coming in, it's all making sense. It's all within that same theme, and the feeling is like complete. So in a sense, so that's how I'm processing and working as I start to pull the pieces. And then I saw what I did in the first, and now I see, now where do I take these pictures that I had edited out as, or not edited out, but edited to what was working on the walls in the first gallery, to now how do I look at the second gallery and what are the themes that are going on here? It seemed that, while there may have been some from the tornado in the first, I realized tornado, our relationship to nature and our city, people, place, things, it started to become more of that type of groupings more. And so in this gallery, and now here the other thing about this gallery, when you walk into this gallery, generally you're walking, most people, even though the building is circular, you're generally walking in from the old lobby. So you make a left into the building, and then you usually make a left and you come into this gallery. And the first wall you hit, you can't not see that. You visually see this wall first. It's shorter than the wall across from it. So I have to consider what's the impact of this wall. And I had all these pictures with so much color. And so this gallery really absorbed most of the pictures with color. And then I'm also looking usually to, if there's a large piece usually in a show, it tends to anchor the wall. And so the piece I chose for the middle I chose it as the anchor. And then I had to say, okay, what is this picture and what is it saying and what can work around it if this is the anchor? So it's like, it was a story, it's Nashville. And so, it's, so then it was like Nashville and nature. So it was intuitive, and yet there was this feeling of balancing the color. Now there's some pictures without frames and some with, and how does that work? And how can I get the best layout of the exhibit, chat with the challenge of all of that going on as well. So I'm trying to consider that. And then of course the 2 walls are walking against each other. So when you're standing in that room, what is the balance of that wall against the other wall? And so I try to consider that, but also if somebody comes in and walks to the left naturally, and then they walk around and come back to the right, or are they going to walk immediately from the right and go down? What's the story going there? So I'm thinking of the stories backwards, forwards, across from each other. So these are all the things that are going through my mind to try to balance it out and make the story and the feeling, continuous. And so this one was started out with the worker, I believe it's the workers, yeah. And again, it's Black Lives Matter and protests, and this wall kind of contained everything. This one was again, and then this one had the tornado, and then it kind of morphed into nature and the isolation of actually just places with a boat and a tree, the landscape. So this one was more, I was working with the color, and in the middle, I chose to put the pictures of love as kind of like balancing out the picture of Nashville, which was across from it. I used the photograph with love to kind of be also an anchor, because I felt like that's a theme that is also emerging from this year. We have this whole story of just, unkindness, and then, the antidote being love. And so I felt like that the love and the color just kind of anchored that wall and was kind of like the you know, when you write a song, I'm also a songwriter, you kind of build the song up to a place and then you keep it there and you exit out. And so I felt like that wall led up to love, you know, and just kind of exited more into, moved into kind of like the end of the show, even though it's all circular in a way. But so I'm thinking all these things are what goes through my mind, and I guess that's where I'll stop. I hope if that helps or makes sense to everything. Yeah.
Well, I loved hearing that, Carrie. That was wonderful. And there were so many points of connection. Like I can relate on so many different levels, and just you get in the zone and you just kind of have to work with different things and think about it. And I loved hearing, you know, you give words to like the isolation, the protests, the Nashville, like all of these things that I really could kind of see with my eye, but just to hear you kind of say that, yes, that's what you were thinking about. And hearing that you're a songwriter also kind of, you know, this is a creative process, and this is just seems to be another manifestation of that for you. And I guess one of my questions, it was that the long wall in the second gallery. And because at first, you know, I came around this way and it was these works that I see as just being so like formally interesting, and then some of the later works that had more of the like the social justice theme. And now I think I'm seeing that a lot of that had to do with color versus black and white. So there's some things that may seem like so obvious to the person making those plans, but getting that kind of spelled out a little bit is helpful. So thank you so much. That was really insightful for me. And like I said, I really do feel like this exhibition, I mean, this was a co-curators were working on this. I might have selected the works, and then this other experienced curator came in and did the layout. So it really is a joint endeavor, and I'm glad that we were able to hear from you. So Emily, are you going to run the machine with all of the images if it's time for me to start talking about the different pictures?
If you want me to.
That would be great if you don't mind.
I think I can.
If not, I think I have it pulled up. You want me to try instead?
Because there's some crazy thing happening that I'm not totally understanding. I've luckily figured it out for the PowerPoint.
Well, let's see. I am sometimes horrible at this. Hang on one second. I thought I had this open, and all right. Here we go. And let's make this full screen. Like so. Okay, can you guys see that okay? It's a little cut off on the side on my screen, but does everybody at least get a decent sense of things? Does that look okay to you, Emily?
Looks good. People are nodding.
Okay, great. So this photograph is by Al Levinson. Are you here tonight, Al? I hope so.
He is. Yes.
Okay.
You can unmute while your photos are up. She may have a question for you.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and I'd love to see this, you know, being a little bit of a conversation. I mean, I was drawn to this image first, just like a lot of the ones I selected, just on the formal elements. I loved the way the wires kind of crisscross the scene. I loved the light. I mean, just the warmth that you see on the building's facade, and then just that glint of it off of the sign right there in the middle. That just initially is what drew me to the photograph. But then of course, as we start to kind of like unpack things a little bit more, and just, you know, this seems so representative to me of like America, for better or for worse, our opioid epidemic, the, gun city, and even just 9/11 for my generation, born in the 70s. 9/11 was the worst thing that our country had experienced. Maybe it still is, but I think it's arguable that what we're going through right now certainly would give it a run for its money. So I feel like that's just such a loaded moment in our country's history, and with the flags and patriotism and kind of questioning what that might be, all of these different things seem to be wound up in one photograph. So that's why I selected this one. Al, do you want to maybe speak to what drew you to the photo? Any of those things, or was it just the sunlight hitting the building?
Everything you've said.
Well, great.
I had a frame where I pulled back even a little more and had more wires and various elements. When I'm doing this sort of work, somebody called one time vernacular cultural landscapes. I remember from my photojournalism days, they would always say sometimes less is more, but when I'm doing this sort of thing, I'm almost thinking sometimes more is more. But as long as everything is contributing to illustrate what you want to illustrate. Anyway, no, I have nothing else to say about it. This was taken before the George Floyd stuff.
Okay.
A few months. It was late last fall or middle of last fall, I guess.
Well, and isn't that interesting how it's impossible for us to not see things kind of through the lens of the current moment? If this was taken as nothing to do with maybe the current political moment, and yet it's hard for me to not see that, and maybe that's just me. But I think the role of the viewer is something that is constantly shifting, and you as artists, I'm not a maker, I'm just an art historian and a curator, but I wonder if that, I often wonder what it's like to let go as an artist and let other people view and experience and interpret your work in a way maybe independently from what you thought. So that's really interesting to hear when this work was taken. So we've got another one from you, Al, here. And this one definitely resonated with me because the artist who made the wheat paste mural there, the "Who Are You and Why Are You Here," is a dear friend and a wonderful artist named Lysander Bryant that I've included in a group show at the Frist before, and who I'm working with on another project now. And so seeing that definitely caught my attention. I also know this building well. As you know, it's on Buchanan Street, across the street from Southern V. And so that caught my attention, but also just formally those colors. I mean, that electric green and then Lee's red and yellow. You can't not see this photograph. And then compositionally, the way you framed it with the angles of the architecture, and again, the light. You seem to be particularly attuned to the lighting, seeing that come in with the shadows there. This definitely got my heart. I love this photograph. I think it's really terrific. And then when I saw that you titled this "Self-Reflection Requested," that also caught my attention because that's exactly what Lee is trying to do through that wheat paste mural of his. And just hearing you say that, I thought was just hearing it in a different words got my attention for sure. So I really like this one. Is there something that you want to say about this picture?
No, I'm not often going out looking to get light and what do they call it, the magic hours or whatever, but I happened to be out that day at that time and was happy I was.
Well, that's great. Well, it's such a you can't, like, that green building is so recognizable. In fact, even earlier today, I was taking a little scroll on Instagram and I saw a post. Obviously there's a lot happening in North Nashville right now, and there was another banner, another mural or poster, I guess you could say, that was on that building, and you could see Lee's mural is getting more and more faded, but you can't help but notice, I mean, that building is that building. There's not another one like it. So I really like that picture. So definitely a different picture was this one by Al Wood, Rowing at Sunrise. And this would be an instance for me of I would never present those two works like next to each other because they're so different. This to me is very much in the beautiful, the take a deep breath, just, kind of try to relax a little bit, which, I do feel like art plays an important role in that too. It's just a very soothing picture. I was drawn to just the compositional elements, the horizon line, and then the sky, with the clouds and the water below and the reflection of the clouds in the water. When I zoomed in a little bit closer, I noticed that, some of the rowers were looking forward, some were looking back. And of course you can maybe try to make meaning out of that if you wanted. But overall, I just picked this because of its composition. It just was a very balanced, pleasing image. The color tones were, I really appreciated those. Al, if you're on the call, is there anything you want to share with us about the photo? Like, where was it taken and maybe when?
Well, it was taken off of Hilton Head Island, I guess probably in January this year.
Okay.
I think these people were taking a coursework in how to operate that rowboat. So they
Okay.
were out with the instructor.
Well, it's one of those pictures that's like so pretty. It's almost hard to believe that like it really happened. So it's nice to hear, where and when, and it's really a beautiful photograph. Thank you.
I usually don't. He said he didn't go out for the golden hour. I usually don't shoot after 10 a.m.
Okay.
I shoot early in the morning, and that's when
Okay.
it's made.
Well, it's beautiful, and it's one of those photos. Like I wondered, was it either at daybreak or at sunset? Sometimes it's hard to tell unless where you are exactly and where the sun is setting. But that it's a beautiful picture, and that is something that as we're talking through these images, I'm always interested in knowing: is the photograph in the show representative of your practice in general, or is it kind of a one-off? So feel free to like chime in on that as well. All right, so picture 4, Bill Lindsley, what does the future hold? Well, first and foremost, I just have to ask, if you're here, like, where was this taken? Because obviously I was just so drawn to, I think right now we all have a little bit of wanderlust as we're stuck in our homes, and travel seems so far away. And I was just really attracted to the scene. It's so beautiful. Bill, are you here? And can you share with us?
This is the Perito Moreno Glacier in Patagonia.
Okay. I figured it was the very tip of South America, but
I think I remember traveling in the past. It's all fog now.
Right? Seems like so long ago. Well, it's a beautiful picture. I also like it formally with the various bands of color, the white of the clouds, the slate color of the mountains, and then the blue of the ice, and the tan color of the rocks. I mean, I liked it for that formal aspect as well. I also couldn't help but think of, with that lone figure in red of the German romantic painter, Caspar David Friedrich. You probably know his picture. He did several, of the most famous being Monk by the Sea, of this lone figure kind of looking out over the ocean, and this idea of the sublime, and humanity's insignificance compared to nature. And so my mind also went there with that picture, despite the fact that at first I was just drawn to the beauty of it. I also couldn't help but think of that too, and just the awesomeness, if you will, of the physical landscape and our physical environment. Is there anything else that you want to add about the picture, or did you have any thoughts of that, or were you just trying to capture the moment?
No, I mean, I think with the bands and the color, I'm just drawn to and the landscapes. And I was just laying there taking a break actually. And this man stood up with this red jacket. I thought, this is unbelievable.
Right.
And it really taught me the importance of scale. Usually I try to avoid having picked people in my landscapes, but I think this one really helped.
Definitely. That scale is really important. And you're right, it would be a completely different photograph if he was wearing a gray jacket. I mean, that red was just, I mean, that's it. That's what really makes it. So
Yeah.
great shot.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Deshaun, I know from some other projects, and nice, hi. And I was drawn to a lot of Deshaun's work because, you know, I'm especially thinking right now about what's happening, this, you know, the Great Awakening, if that's what you want to call it, or this reckoning that's happening in our country with regard to equity and justice. And there's a lot of important conversations and movements, of course, out in the streets. And I think it's critical that we capture those, that we keep our foot on the throttle, and you know, continue to have these conversations. And I think that photography is a great way to kind of document what happened, especially in the height of things during the summer, and kind of keep those conversations going. So this photograph, I was interested in particular, you know, first just formally, again, the angle taken from below, the empty space of the sky and the clouds, just kind of the off-kiltered angle of the building. And I was also drawn to the title, In Memory Of, and you know, the open-endedness of this and the symbolism of this is kind of a representation of every man, every black man, every black person that's been killed by a police officer. I mean, and just the masking of the figure, like in my mind, this just seemed as like a tribute to, you know, everyone who has been a part of that, of those tragedies. And so in my mind, it was just kind of like an archetypal, you know, tribute to that. And I thought it was really important. And again, just the mask also kind of acknowledging or marking this moment in particular of what's happening in 2020. So I really like this picture. Deshaun, are you on the call? Is there anything you want to say about this photo?
Yes, I'm here. You pretty much
Okay.
summed it up, and just like the look on his face, it says so much. Like, I mean, his eyes, because you can't really
Mhm.
see his face because of the mask, so you are drawn like directly to his eyes. Like he's sad, angry, like I said, memorializing someone. It's like all of those emotions in one to me.
Mhm. And then holding a sunflower. I mean, I think that's a
Yes,
sunflower, right? And I mean,
yes,
that's unexpected. That's not what you see every day. And just this, like, you know, this living flower, this, you know, this sign of hope and beauty. And like, you know, I just thought it was a really, you know, first of all, I'd like to ask this guy, like, what is the importance of the sunflower to him? But then just to capture that in the photograph, to me, was a, you know, overall, you know, a positive message. So and you're right, the look in his eyes, you know, just looking up, looking forward, moving forward. That really struck me too.
yep, I agree.
We've got a couple of your photos here. So here's another one. All right, so we went from kind of memorializing the everyman, if you will, to then someone specific, Gustavo. And I'm sorry to say, I don't know who Gustavo is. Is this somebody that that I should know about?
Yes, the building behind him is a hotel that's being built right outside of the Titan Stadium. I can't remember the name of it.
Okay.
I believe Al was there taking pictures the same day I took this photo, but he was a 16-year-old working on this construction
I
site.
do know exactly what this. Okay.
Yes, and he fell from I don't know what floor, but he fell from the building and passed away. And my
Yep.
first question when I heard about it was, I didn't know 16-year-olds could work on construction sites.
I don't think they're supposed to.
So there's just a lot revolving around that. And then just being in the city, how much construction is going on, and like
Yes.
construction workers' rights, people not being paid, people not having
Yes.
proper benefits, and so on and so on. And it's a common practice. So, which was the
Totally.
name of one of my photos at the first that you y'all was looking
Yeah,
at.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
the
it was.
theme is still kind of going on
Yeah.
here.
I'm so glad to know that context, and I'm so grateful for this dialogue, because now that you say that, I mean, yes, I absolutely know about that situation and just the complexity. And, you know, his older brother, who was over 18, was working on the site. And then you
Hmm.
think about the contractor that, not the subcontractor, not like the big contractor, the subcontractor who we heard got fined like a whole lot of money.
Hmm.
And just thinking about, like, gosh, they were probably getting pressure from the folks above him to, like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And they needed labor. And it just like, and so now that guy is probably, I mean, obviously it was this, poor, child, the 16-year-old boy was killed, but just, is it his fault alone? I don't think so. The
Right.
subcontractors, I mean, there's such a wider story that's a part of it. And obviously the construction boom in Nashville and putting the pressure on opening these hotels and all these facilities as soon as possible is, adding to things hugely. Well, gosh, I'm so glad to hear that about that. And definitely that adds even greater poignancy to the picture. I have to say, I also, that aside, I just love this photo formally. I love the grids that you see with the, I guess the steel bars that are forming the interior of the building, and how
Hmm.
that relates to the crane, and just the way those have been put together. And I guess you can tell I like the photos that are taken from below. So I really like this picture formally, as well as now, especially that I know kind of the concept behind it too. So great picture.
Katie, Emily had suggested that if I want to jump in at any point to just,
Please do.
because while we're talking about these two photographs, and I'm looking over the layout of how I laid them out, that the first picture was really again the anchor of that first wall, and it was kind of like the height. It was like had a spiritual feeling that kind of was uplifting. The first picture, and then I used this picture that you're speaking of now. It was the last picture of that wall very purposely, because it was like, we're talking about like life and death, and so it was almost I pulled the wall into kind of like, there's so much death, but and just the rest in peace aspect of it, that I felt was like kind of almost like a period of that sentence.
Hmm.
So I was aware of these two pictures on this wall, where why I put them in the places that I did. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah. I know I heard you talk a lot about, like, we have our anchor piece, the thing that really holds the wall at the Frist, the way our galleries are laid out. We also talk about like our vista piece, like what's going to pull you from one gallery to the next. But there's also the piece in the corner, or at the end of the wall, and you want to make sure that really anchors it carefully too. And so there's so many things at play, aren't there? And the relationships between sometimes you want to space things out so that you're not suggesting a relationship. Sometimes you hang them closer to say that there is something. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Katie,
Yes.
this is Bill Lindsley, the acting secretary.
Yes.
Would you mind, when you discuss the photo, at some point give the name or
Yes.
title rather of the photo?
Sorry.
For my note?
So this was Deshaun Lewis's R.I.P. Gustavo.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And then moving into this one, Deshaun, I can't remember if this one was untitled or but with June 4th in parentheses, or if it is June 4th, but
It was untitled with June 4th in parentheses.
Okay, my notes, I just wrote down June 4th. And I think it's interesting, titles. Right now, dates matter so much. I mean, March 3rd, like what we all know what March 3rd was, and June 4th. Yes. I mean, that is right that was when things were really, really heating up. And I think that providing dates right now in 2020 is is really important, because I think we all can kind of make our connections to like, what were we doing and what were our thoughts and what are our memories of that time. So this photograph is obviously incredibly powerful. I'm drawn to it for a lot of reasons. Obviously, the visual of George Floyd, rest in power, that really important, slogan isn't the right word, but those words are so important, that seeing the Black Lives Matter to the side. But then, of course, what I'm really drawn to are the two women that are clutching hands. And, obviously one is Black and one is white, and that urgency, and even like the look in the eyes of the white woman as they're all lying down, just to kind of even more powerfully express their protest, by being so vulnerable and lying on the ground like that, and seeing that look in her eyes, for me, obviously, as a white woman who's also very interested in equity and in racial justice, it's a reminder that like, we got to do this together. We all have to join together to really push things forward. So, I was really, really drawn to this picture in particular. Deshawn, is there anything you want to say about it in particular?
First thing, I'm not for sure, but I think that's a white man.
Oh,
I'm not for
really?
sure, but I do see
Okay.
how you got the woman from that,
The
though, because
ponytail,
he
I
has the
was
ponytail.
identifying. Okay, that's good to know. I'm gonna have to look at that closer.
I do
Okay.
understand it. And then, like you said, the signs in the background, like the "No Justice, No Peace" with the lady standing up, and then the Black Lives Matter sign on the ground. And then also, the man holding the cell phone, like everything is kind of recorded nowadays. That's kind of tells you about what's going on too. And then the other man to the far left, just his eyes and how he's looking, kind of stood out to me as well. But that's it.
Yeah, all the three figures in the foreground, definitely, like all three of them are super strong. And now that you say that's a guy, I see that. And you're right, and especially speaking to a group of photographers, having the phone, like that's such, even I'm taking walks in the morning and pictures of my neighborhood and what's happening there. And, we're all photographers these days, even more. And obviously you all are more skilled than just the average person with their iPhone, but that sense of, and that impulse to like document, I think we all feel, whether we're professional, amateur, or just, casual folks with our phone in our back pocket. Here was another one that I was drawn to for sure. Again, I love like the first one that we saw of your works. I love kind of the empty space of the sky. I love the perspective, looking up at this figure, kind of heroizing her. This is a woman. If I
Yes.
see, okay, all right, just making sure. I just thought that was really important to give these folks the prominence, the stature that they deserve. But then when I looked a little bit more closely, I also saw that Carmack's name on this pedestal, and that history, and and is this the site where the sculpture was taken down from?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Which the People's Plaza renamed Ida B. Wells Plaza in memorial
Yes.
of her.
Which is so awesome, because of course Carmack is the one that burned her office, and so I mean this is a great cycle as I see it. But I figured that's where the sculpture was, and I think this also, I'm in conversation with some folks about new monuments and who are the heroes that we want to memorialize now. And this young woman might not get a permanent statue, but in my mind, folks that are speaking up are heroes. And then on a completely different bend, and again, this is where, like, for me, this is a little bit of whiplash. I would have this work on a different wall, which is what Carrie did too. This is just one of those great photos. The second you see it, it captures your imagination, or it captured my imagination. It's just beautiful. The perspective, the intricacy of the branches, the way that the photo gets out of focus on the edges. I mean, it's just it's a great photo. And this was taken by, this is called Reaching. It was made by David Morell. And David, if you're on the call, do you want to say anything about the picture? Where was it and when was it taken, maybe?
He's not on the call with us.
Okay. Well, maybe for those of you who are familiar with his work, is this typical for his practice, or is it a one-off?
It's pretty typical.
Okay.
But he does a lot of different things, so.
Okay. Well, again, this is the type of picture that I could see myself just walking, in my hallway, that I would walk by a lot, and every time kind of notice a different branch or something with it. It's just it's a really formally interesting picture to my eye. And then this photo is by Denny Edcock, and gosh, a lot to be said about this photograph. It's called American Gothic Nashville. And I think, is this Christchurch?
Yes.
Okay. So obviously kind of at the top of the hill before we go to downtown Nashville, right across from the Frist. And, there's so much to be said about this. There's a lot of commentary, obviously, whether it's about, organized religion and helping people in need and taking care of them, helping to provide shelter. The juxtaposition also of more specifically about Nashville and downtown and all the bachelorettes and everybody here for a party, but then also we're seeing growing numbers of, homeless and people experiencing poverty. And there's just a whole lot in this picture that I see. And of course, it's also, framed really beautifully, and just capturing the detail of how this gentleman has, he's even changed from looks like his walking shoes into his flip-flops. Those are some of the things that caught my eye. What drew you to the scene?
Well, I've driven by that location a million times, and actually I shut this out my car window at a stop. It's like, I got to get this. I hadn't really thought about it much till I was looking at it later. The blood, the red in the bottom, it looks almost like a sacrificial thing too, with the blood on the sidewalk. Do you see that?
I do. I noticed that, and I thought the same thing, but I don't want to read into it too much,
Yeah, and the gargoyles above are historically are dual meanings, so I like that. But it kind of glowed at me. It was like it needed to be photographed, and the formality of the building, of the situation, and it also struck me that the guy is dressed not. This may sound worse than I intended, but he's not dressed like who you think of as a street person. He looks like 3 weeks ago he may have had some money, and suddenly he is pushed into this, which is very much 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So,
totally.
I'd like to jump in and just say something about this photograph too, because I'm from New York, and every time I go up to New York, I'm so struck by the juxtaposition, or any city that I've been recently, DC, New York, even when I was in St. Augustine, Florida, in the city, the little town, the city part of St. Augustine. I was struck. This is such a universal picture to me. I feel like I could be in any city and see this. And that to me was the real power for me, just as forget curator, just like a human being. Like, I feel like, oh, am I in New York? What am I looking at? Where am I? Because it's just, it's very powerful. It speaks to our situation as a whole. And I mean, I know you mentioned that, but I just had to jump in because I feel like I'm in New York or in DC or any place right now. And it makes it all the more powerful to me. Yeah.
Completely.
A friend of mine did point out that church actually does do a lot of work with the homeless. So,
and that's there's a church just down in Hillsborough Village that I attend, and I have noted, and they are very committed to. Susan Hay, I think you're on this call. Very committed to helping people who are experiencing homelessness, and and there's often a homeless person right there. And so I know that there's a challenge for churches who are trying to help, and maybe it isn't going exactly the way they are hope. You know what I mean? I think it's a more complicated matter than we might initially think, you know, because I think that there are attempts to reach out. I mean, of course, a church is going to attempt to help somebody, but maybe that it's not that easy, you know, I guess is what I'm saying. So this brings up a lot of universal issues for sure, Carrie. And then this photograph was one kind of like David Morrell's Reaching. I like trees, and I was like, oh, what a beautiful tree. Like, that's just so expressionistic, just seeing the branches, the twisting, you know, limbs of this tree, and obviously the way the sun is coming through. It's a gorgeous picture. And it wasn't until I saw the title, Donaldson Tornado, that I blew it up a little bit, and I saw, oh gosh, you know, the reason why there are no leaves and no smaller branches on this tree is they've been torn off, and I see the destruction in the home. So, you know, I think a lot of people talk about I mean, obviously there's the destruction and the really horrible parts of natural disasters, but often sometimes in their wake, there's also, you know, beautiful things like this too, that are revealed. Now, obviously, maybe if I wasn't seeing this as a photograph and I was right there in the scene, it probably felt very different. But the way that you've captured it, you know, it's really beautiful. What was it like being in that space? This was in Donaldson, is that right?
Correct, yeah. It's interesting on McGavick Pike through there from, I don't know what that area is called, but anyway, there are a number of trees like that have these old gnarly branches. And I've photographed them a number of times, but I'd driven through that area, right? I think this was 2-3 days after the tornado, and it just struck me how it was just this scream for something, I don't know. But I took several shots, and I included, you can't see my hands moving around, can you? The sun coming through was almost like a little beacon of hope there.
Right.
This building behind it, which actually is a church that a friend of mine and his band had their instruments stored in, apparently. And in the neighborhood behind where I shot this was decimated. So yeah, I mean, it's like a scream in the dark almost, I think, in many ways.
Wow, that's a nice way that's a powerful way to think about it. Yeah, I don't, you know, I'm not getting out much these days, but there have been some times, you know, a few weeks ago, I found myself in East Nashville, and I have been in North Nashville a couple of times. And it's the tornado, I mean, it is still so real, like so many parts. I mean, it's like everything's stopped in mid-March, and so many things are still completely, you know, maybe there's a blue tarp on the roof, but a lot of the recovery has not happened. And it really seems kind of frozen in time, which is kind of scary. And speaking of time, I'm seeing that I'm only on photograph 12. And so I need to maybe pick up my pace a little bit here. But this is another one of yours, Denny, from the tornado. This time it looks like you've moved to East Nashville on Russell Street. And, you know, again, I felt like this project, it was important to kind of mark the moment, and this tornado being so destructive and, you know, such an important part of Nashville's story in 2020. And, you know, this photograph, I was drawn to a lot of things, just the red that's kind of interspersed throughout the composition, the tree that's kind of shaved off on its side and kind of fits in nicely within that corner of the room. What drew you to take this scene in particular?
Well, certainly those, and the reds, of course. The thing that I first saw, though, was the broom. Just kind of, it was like they just leaned the broom up and walked away.
Yeah.
I will say this one and another one. In 1998, I had signed a lease to a place 2 days before that tornado came through, and lived in East Nashville for, I don't know, 10 or so years, since moved to Inglewood. But when it struck the same area again, it really broke my heart, because it was, I know people that live 2 houses down from that. Just to see that amount of devastation again was just, I mean, this, and it hurt my soul basically. So I spent a lot of time wandering through those neighborhoods.
Yeah, I know. It just seems like how, especially like, I mean, right. I mean, it was hit. I mean, it just got hit, it seems like,
Mhm.
and it's just, and recovery's, so slow.
That building's still standing like that, by the way, as of earlier in the week. So
Yeah, and that's what has struck me is like some of these places that I went to, between March 3rd and March 13th or whenever everything shut down, like trying to go out and help and volunteer and being back in some of those places and just seeing like, how the recovery effort has been so crippled by everything else that's happening. This is another one of your tornado pictures that, again, at first I was just like, oh, that's a beautiful picture. Like, I don't know what I'm seeing, but I love it. And I definitely see kind of like the dances. You call this one wind dance, and it was March 4th, the day after the tornado. And, again, I think it speaks to, obviously there's the destruction, but some of the kind of ironic beauty that comes out of that as well. So really, and is this in East Nashville as well, or what part of town?
yeah,
is
that's on Main Street.
Okay.
I can't think of what's behind me, but yeah, it's actually, I think that Arts Store is to your left, a few buildings down. Now I can't think of the name of the art store, but anyway, yeah, it's interesting. A lot of my friends who are painters love this, and I am curious as to why the painters would like it more than the photographers. So
The texture of those clouds is what I guess
well,
I'm
that could well
suspecting
be.
they might be interested in.
It's so
Oh,
funny that in that picture when you were speaking about the one before it, and then I look at that one, now I just see the trees look like brooms.
Mhm.
oh yeah, right, massive, big
Yeah.
brooms. Yeah, that's a good point. All right. So this is Emily Helm's picture, Books on Lockdown. And again, this is one at first, just the formal relationship of all those squares together and those horizontal slats with the siding, and then on the porch and the windows, and then the big, the larger kind of awning area. Like I really loved that, the reflections, the light. But then again, when you look at it more carefully, and the library is closed, it again reminded me of so many different, just walking around my neighborhood, all the signs that the businesses were putting up trying to respond to what was happening were closed or were curbside only, or just trying to like figure out day by day what they were going to do. And then I also, when I looked at it more closely, I saw it said library Wi-Fi available 24/7. And I was wondering, I was like, is that something that's from COVID? Was that like trying to be a hotspot for, school kids or whatever? I don't know, but I thought it was really interesting to see. Emily, are you on the call? And
I'm on the call, and yes, it was set up to be a hotspot for anybody that needed it. People, a lot of it was students maybe that didn't have Wi-Fi at home. There was a couple people sitting off to the side, which I probably should have had in the picture, using their electronic devices. Sumner County had put out something from the museum that they wanted people to record what was happening in the city and to submit photos to them to record things. So I was just driving around and trying to find things in Hendersonville that would be interesting 20 years from now. And I just thought it was interesting. They just put together a little handwritten sign to put in the window is closed for the pandemic, so it's just kind of capturing the history for the county museum.
100%. I mean, you definitely have done that with it. And in my mind, you're capturing like the moment, but also just like the spirit of like pivoting. Like we've all learned to pivot, and like, okay, so we can't be open. We can't let we can't check out our books at the moment. What can we do in service to our community? Well, we can offer this hotspot. And,
They did, yeah.
you know, that's, I think, you know, so many individuals and institutions, like everybody's trying to figure out what they can do to help the community. And I think that this captures it perfectly. Even if you have to look closely to kind of catch it right there, I think that's a great example of that, you know, that spirit. Emily Passano, this is one of your photos, Endless Morning. And this is another one of those photographs that I was just drawn to it formally. I love that diagonal. I love the intersection of the other one. I like the reflection. I like the girl holding the doll. You know, there's so many things that are happening. But what I couldn't figure out is where exactly is this? Isn't Bicentennial Mall, is it? Could you maybe tell us where this is and when you took it?
That's Courthouse Square.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just zoomed in. Well, actually cropped in. I wasn't that close to her. And it
Okay.
was early winter, a warm winter day.
Okay.
How we have those.
Yeah, well,
But it's just, yeah.
yeah, it's just one of those like formally really interesting pictures, like simple on the one hand, but there's so much going on. Again, just looking at the textures and the reflection and the light and, you know, how you framed it. Like, I think it's a really interesting picture. So
Thank you.
and a totally different one. And this is where I'm curious to know, again, more about your practice. This one obviously has a little bit more social commentary. This wall is close to where I live. I see it a lot too, and it's constantly changing, and it no longer has this, but the juxtaposition of this, you know, obviously this nice home with its ridge of roses, and then on the other side of the chain link fence, this wall that gets tagged a lot, and in this case, obviously, you know, trying to call for justice for Breonna Taylor. Is there anything you want to say about this picture? And
Well, it's exactly what you said is what drew me to it. I love the way I get a lot of photos down there. Kids do skateboarding and good things. And part of my practice is to try to get out in the neighborhood and just kind of document the neighborhood and see what's happening. And this just was beyond the neighborhood. It spoke to the neighborhood and what people around here care about. But it was more universal. And I think when I took that, I'm not going to get into that. We're running out of time. That's what I was thinking.
well, I could keep going on and on about it too, but maybe we'll have that conversation offline. But I was really happy to see this photograph, and I bet that this can I call it a mural? I'm not even sure if I can, but I don't think it was up very long, and
less than maybe 3 days before we have neighborhood people who often think it's their job to go paint over whatever.
which I don't understand. I mean, so often they're like beautiful works of art. Like, I'd much rather have that than your gray paint. But anyway, there's a lot to say here, but I think that's a really compelling photograph. And one more by you, Emily, Safe Distance. And this was one that I definitely had to take a couple of looks at, like, what am I looking at? I'm trying to, you know, is it sideways? You know what? And I obviously figured it out once I saw that foot and the reflection. And I think it's the, you know, it must be the window or the door covering has some colored element or something that's causing a little bit of distortion in the reflection. And, you know, I'm just dying to know, like, where did this happen? And in my mind, just kind of that disorientation maybe that I felt when I first saw the picture is emblematic of what we're all feeling right now in this kind of topsy-turvy world. And yet there's that, you know, stay 6 feet apart, which grounds us. And we all know what that is these days.
Well, this was at the Vanderbilt Medical Center at 100 Oaks.
Okay.
And so there's a skylight, and I had an early morning annual appointment. And I had just SNAP had this wonderful discussion led by Sue Henry and a bunch of people who are here on using your iPhone. So I saw the light, pulled out my iPhone, and that was the story behind that. And I'll tell you one more funny thing. When I first printed it, before I framed it for the show, I signed it upside down. So
Well, so I'm glad I'm not the only one.
yeah.
Yeah, but again, I just think that topsy-turviness is something that we can all relate to. So I'm gonna rush through a little bit and maybe spend time on like one photograph per person. I'm sorry, I do tend to talk too much. So this is one of your pictures, shift change, just in general. Again, it's a sign of the times, and I feel like you can really sense the weight of what these, medical professionals is what I'm assuming these are near the Vanderbilt campus, medical center campus, just like the weight on both their shoulders and just in their eyes, like you can tell everything that they're really going through. Kay Ramming, are you on the call? This photograph this is timeless in my mind. It looks like a Charles Sheeler or a Margaret Burke White photo from the Machine Age, just an industrial factory.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Well, and this is actually a very old image, printed not terribly long ago, but it is an image from a manufacturing plant in Wisconsin that I did a whole project on, and I didn't have anything that was really current, and I actually could have put others from this project in it, but this has always been one of my favorites, and it's closed.
Yep.
So actually and truly, it wasn't closed.
But it's all right. Artistic license.
Yeah. It to me, it really says it can speak to what is happening today.
Totally. Well, and that's where, I was just like, I love these kind of photographs. I love those pictures from like the 20s and 30s. Like they're just so great.
Well, it wasn't that long ago. But
well, I know, but you know what I mean.
I know.
Kind of industrial.
I know.
Age
It was probably
photos.
from the 80s.
Okay.
But thank you very much, because it's one of my favorites.
I just love it. But then all it took was that closed. And I was like, oh, see, it's relevant. It's amazing.
I'm not good with titles, but when I looked at it, I'm like, yeah, it's closed.
Totally.
So that was it.
Yeah, no, well, great job. It's a great picture, one I could look at for a long time. And this one too, this is a photograph that I really enjoy looking at. Kimberly Manson. This is called Same But Different. I before I knew the title, I just like the composition. I love a good architectural photograph. I love the way it's kind of unexpectedly a little off center, just seeing that slice of the apartments or the condos on the right, not just, not so like perfectly balanced that you only see the ones that are, mirroring each other. I thought that was really interesting. I loved the wires that didn't line up quite right with the balconies. And then when I saw the title being Same But Different, maybe this is again just kind of my headspace where I am right now, just kind of taking it to a more theoretical level. Like, is this supposed to be like representative of like humanity? Like we all have the same basic elements, just like these condos do, but we're also super different too. And is that is this meant to be kind of a commentary on that? I also have to say shout out to St. Louis Blues. I'm a St. Louis native, so I like seeing that too. But Kimberly, are you on this call? Am I reading too much into that picture, or was that something you were thinking about too?
Yeah, when I took it, it caught my attention just immediately. I was actually leaving a doctor's appointment and I was at a stoplight, and just the way it mirrored each other and everything, it was symmetrical, but I kind of struggled with that. Did I want it to be perfect or a little bit off, like you're saying? And I finally went with leaving the part on the right. And then the more I looked at it, actually when I took it, it was that everything was the same. And then the Black Lives Matter sign, and then the sign across from, I couldn't tell what it was, but it was obviously, something sports related. And it was just like, you know, what's important at the time? Is it sports or is it something like Black Lives Matter? And I know that that sports sign was probably out there long before the Black Lives Matter sign, but that's what caught my attention initially.
Yeah, just kind of the juxtaposition. Two very, you know, people can feel very passionately about either thing and both things too. And I it's interesting to hear you say that it's intentionally those two signs, and maybe I'm kind of dense for not having gotten that that's exactly what you were speaking to. And I was thinking about it just like the broader, like so many of these have the two chairs and the two doors, and like that was the similarity. But everything was a little different too.
Now, when I had to title it and I looked at it, that was my initial thought when I took the photo. But then after I looked at it closer and I had to title it, you know, it was everything that you just said. Yeah, you know, how they are built the same, but each person has some form of chair or some form of table. They're not exactly alike. And, you know, it's the same, but it's different. So, yeah. So I was right there with you.
Cool. Great photo. And then this one is by you too. Streets Daring Quarantine. And I mean, there are several, we'll see a couple of shots of downtown Nashville. And I think we all are, you know, I mean, it's just kind of like, it's so, seeing downtown Nashville so desolate is such a, you know, a reminder of like what exactly was happening. I mean, obviously it's not there anymore, but this is not normally what you see down there. So that really caught my attention. And obviously just the framing, the lighting, like all of that to me, you know, stood out. And I also, for some reason, like I feel like I never see shots of Broadway going like up the hill. It's always looking down. So that perspective I thought was interesting in this photograph too, and seeing the arenas, whatever you call that, on the left instead of on the other side, I thought was really interesting. So a great shot of.
Are those two guys playing hockey in the street? Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
There's one standing on the corner and then there's one in the street.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I missed this guy. Oh my gosh, I totally missed that. Thank you for pointing that out, Deshaun. I missed that. Yeah, well, that makes this even more interesting and even more of a like a moment that could only happen in spring of 2020, playing hockey in the streets of Lower Broad. Wow, that is super interesting. Thank you for pointing that out. And then this picture, the trade, Carrie, you talked about isolation, and that's why you put it in that grouping. And when I saw it, it was almost the kind of a sadness of, you know, trading maybe one outdated thing for another, you know, that maybe farms, you know, we're losing some of the small farms. And that's kind of what struck me when I saw it. Kimberly, what were your thoughts when you saw the car?
Yeah, the same. It's like, what position are these people in that they're going to, instead of just saying, hey, for sale, they specifically said trade for a tractor. Like, what was the reasoning behind that?
Right.
And what type of position were they in? It just made me wonder.
And will that help? You know, how much is that going to help them? I hope so. But yeah, that really caught my attention. And then again, a kind of an abrupt shift here with Laura Carpenter's work, Ashore. Again, just a really beautiful, calming picture. Reminds me of some of the pictorialist photographs of the 19th century, with the kind of out of focus top part of the composition. This is something, Carrie, I can't remember where you put this picture, but in my world, if I had done this, I would have probably put this with the rowers.
You know, this is where the color and this is where I had to make decisions on the overall, you know, trajectory of a wall and its story, because this one was like one of those where I wanted to almost put it by itself. So it's just those last three of that long wall in the Sig-Held Gallery, I was somehow trying to transition into these three shots that kind of had this feeling that could work together, but I kept struggling with there were certain places I wanted to separate and I didn't have the space. So I agree with that. Yeah. But
Well,
I the thing against the with the voters. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you're so right about like black and white versus color. Like, of course, like sometimes that's really hard to mix. And so it's just, it's interesting. Laura, are you on this call? And is there anything that you wanted to add about it, like where it was made or when it was taken?
I'm here. Thank you for the comments and for choosing the photo. I'm happy to be compared to a pictorialist for a day. This was shot with a Holga on film this summer at my friend's cabin. Yeah, but it sort of speaks to the strange summer that it's been.
It is a strange summer. For sure. And you're right. I mean, knowing that happened this summer in some ways, I mean, I feel like if any of us were lucky enough to get away, it was trying to kind of go to someplace, you know, a quiet place in the country. Nobody's really necessarily going to New York or Chicago to Broadway shows or, you know, even Disney World, but it's kind of those more quiet moments out like this. So it's a really soothing picture, which I think we all need to. So Leslie Gill took this picture, a couple folks, hands on, hands off. And again, this is just such a sign of the times, you know, wearing our gloves and how, you know, even when you see the contributor folks, you know, wearing their masks or I should say, especially because they come in contact with so many people, wearing the masks and the gloves, it's just a reminder of what a strange time that we're in. And actually, maybe Leslie, you could speak about this photo if you're on the call, which I also, you know, I like the subject matter, but also I just thought this was so interesting formally. You've got the bricks and the sign, you know, everything's kind of marching down the street, and then literally there are the figures that are marching down the street with their fists raised. I just thought that was really interesting to see, like the top half of the composition with the bottom, and just even thinking about the textures and those differences. Leslie, are you here? And do you want to?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I mean, I think what really struck me about this scene was, I mean, so the march was incredibly powerful. This was one of the first big Black Lives Matter marches. And I think what struck me was thinking about how in 1961, people, African-American students were protesting to desegregate downtown Nashville. And now, what is it, 60 years later, Jim Crow is gone, but people are still marching. This time it was a multiracial group led by African Americans. So, you know, for me, I don't know, I just thought the continuity and the change at the same time were fascinating. What you don't see in this picture were a lot of white tourists standing along the side, not wearing masks, while all of the protesters had masks on. So it was just, it was an incredibly powerful moment too.
I can totally imagine. And you're right. I didn't see photographs in this group, but that would be a great photo. Wouldn't it be? Like, we locals who care so much about our community, who want to make it better, and the tourists are just in for a bachelorette party and disregarding our safety by not wearing
Why
masks.
wasn't mine working?
Let's see, moving on. Leslie, this is your picture too. Another really powerful protest picture with the messaging there. And, you know, the signs are so powerful. I think it was Malcolm X, and what he said is, you know, it's not a chip on my shoulder, it's your knee on my neck. And like, that's something that has struck me a lot through these protests, and to see that, you know, in a sign like this, a protest sign, is super powerful. I'm so glad you captured it. Was this the same day?
Yeah, it was the same day. And this person was positioning himself at lots of different places during the march to show the sign. So yeah, I like the sign too.
Yep, I like I like him also. Okay, so Mary Rice, there are two photos by you, Facing Uncertainty. This photograph, which I actually just adore this photograph. I love it formally. I love the bold colors. I like the composite. I like simple composition sometimes, like this one, where it's almost like just geometric forms. The band of red, the white box with the smaller cubes inside, and then the lines. But then when you look at it closely and you try to figure out what you're looking at, it's upside down, right? I mean, I am right about this one. Are you here? Are you here, Mary? Okay.
Yeah, you got it. That's right.
Okay.
And so it was I took it before I took it in 2019, I think, but I've always liked it because I like abstract photography. But when I was looking back through my files as to what to submit that might work with this exhibit, I thought this would work because it is an upside down world right now.
Completely.
And we are facing uncertainty, and there's the whole, like, we're stuck inside our houses or whatever, and kind of peeking out through the blinds, but we don't really know what's coming. And so I just thought, I've always seen a face in that picture, so that's
I see a face too.
yeah.
No, I think that's exactly what I sensed in this photo. And I think that, again, we were talking about earlier, like, you can't help but to see everything through the eyes or the lens of what we're experiencing right now. And this photo that may have had nothing to do with what we've just talked about when you took it, like, now it's really easy to see that. And the world is upside down, so we may as well have our photos like that. So I think it's really great. And I didn't notice kind of the peeking out through the window, and that adds to that interpretation, I think. And then, shoot, how can you not love a photograph like this? What the world needs now. Yes, it certainly does. And Carrie, when you said that you were kind of anchoring the other side of the wall with these two images, like that totally makes sense to me. And, I think that we all need a little bit of an emotional reprieve sometimes too. And I think this makes a lot of sense. And I guess I would also just say that, sometimes artists and curators, there's work that's like really in your face, and sometimes, being subtle is the right move too. So I feel like there are degrees of that in the works in this exhibition. And this one, obviously, just, compositionally, I love the colors. I love the geometric forms that are in there. I love the different textures of the brick and the siding and the sky. It's just and then the street below. It's a great photo. It's one I want to look at a lot. Mike Gannon, this is your photograph, Isolation, what we are all feeling. And yeah, especially yesterday when it was so rainy and nasty, it's like, is this ever going to end? Are we all going to be in this cold, kind of isolated period? I really liked this picture, obviously, because I think it expresses so much of what many people are feeling, the isolation, but then also kind of that ray of hope, or a little bit of hope too, because, like, there is the light and there's the dog, I mean, we're not really alone, even if we are. And there's another photograph later that, we're connected, whether it's through our pets or with our cell phones. Like, there are some beacons of hope there. Is there anything you want to say about the picture?
No, you've hit it. I was just this was fairly early on in the whole isolation thing, and I was kind of trying to document how Bailey, my dog, and I were feeling with everything that was going on. To get Bailey to be part of this self-portrait, I always have to say squirrel out the door, and she'll come running to look. But that's really what I was trying to do, was kind of just document the feeling of, gee, being isolated.
Yeah. Well, and I love the framing of the French doors, and almost out like prison, like, just like behind bars, like really, really, really trapped. But it also formally, I think, works really well, and the way the light is coming through the shades. Again, it's a really pleasing picture to look at as well.
Thank you.
Another picture of downtown Nashville. This is Pat Hollander, and we have a couple of photos by you. Are you on the line or on the call? Great. Okay. Maybe I'll show a couple and you can kind of share what your thoughts were when you took the picture. Again, the downtown Nashville, I mean, it's hard not to be drawn to these photos. This, I think we had one that was in black and white, and this one is in color and just capturing that neon and like the energy of downtown. But still you can tell how quiet it is, how isolated. This picture, that one was called Quarantine. This is the message. Is it, do I have the, no, sorry. The that one we just saw was Alone. This is Invisible. And I'm really drawn to this picture because you can tell, I think, that it's an essential worker by the vest, but it's not a healthcare worker. And so then I wonder, and when you title the work Invisible, are these the folks like the grocery store workers and the Amazon delivers and the folks that like we are completely dependent on right now, but maybe they're not getting the credit that they're due?
I took this several years ago in Hong Kong, and these are the garbage people that run around with the hand push carts to get the street garbage. And it attracted me because you couldn't tell who they were, and they were in crowds and they just stood out, but yet you didn't see them, and you couldn't smile at them or acknowledge them other than touching them, and you just didn't do that. So I just thought she was isolated and had no face. And that was part of being masked of today.
Yeah. And it's a woman, you say?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. That's so interesting. And again, just kind of going back to this, like, you know, we're seeing things so colored by our experience, and to hear that this was, you know, in China years ago. So interesting. Well, that's what I brought to the picture was that kind of essential worker who wasn't getting the credit that maybe they should get. And then this photograph also, you know, again, we were just talking about we're divided, but we're finding ways to connect through our phone, even though, you know, obviously you don't want to be separated by, you know, a physical or an architectural structure, like at least being able to see each other. And I just thought this captured the way so many of us, I think, feel distanced from our families and our friends.
Well, this is about a woman who had a stroke, a friend of mine, and we were standing outside of her window because at the time, and I don't know if it's changed, in nursing homes, you couldn't go in the building. So she had a window, and that's how she and her husband communicated. And she was quarantined, and she was sad because she was figuring out that half of her body was no longer working. And so every day he would come at 5 o'clock, talk to her, and that's what it was.
Heartbreaking. And I mean, that is what I was kind of reading into it, was one of those nursing care, facilitated care places where you've heard about. I haven't had to experience this yet, thank goodness, with my family, of like, that's how people are communicating, is just outside the window. And I mean, just so heartbreaking. But just the look in her eyes, and just like that connect, like there is still a connection despite the barrier. And this photograph, the message, you know, we've seen a lot of these pictures, and I am drawn to these photographs of the protests because I think they are so important. Just seeing the diversity of people that were participating, seeing the signs and the messaging and what exactly each person was trying to bring to the movement. And this is a, you know, Tutu's statement here, I think is really important. And formally also, I just like the street, you know, the way it regresses into the background. This was a photo I was definitely drawn to. Do you remember when it was made?
About 3 weeks after the Black Lives Matter, they were protesting. They wanted to get rid of the bust of Nathan Buford.
Bedford Forrest.
Bedford, yes, and they wanted to get him out of the state capitol. And
Right.
so it was cute because it was partly Black Lives Matter, but there were a lot of cute little white girls that were doing all the protesting, which was pretty well as far away from Black Lives Matter as you could, but in spirit, they were there.
Well, and I mean, I think that one thing people have commented on is that there are, it's a cross-generational movement and it's a cross-racial movement, that like white people are getting more involved than maybe in the past. So I think that just seeing, again, through some of these photographs, even just the breadth of folks that are involved in the conversations taking place right now is pretty remarkable. Again, switching gears from a protest to this photograph, which is just, I mean, I love this picture just formally. It's so beautiful. It's, I could look at this for a really long time. It's like from a scary movie on the one hand, with that like really eerie light, that green light coming through, but just this exact angle of the parking garage and the way that different, the angles come together, like and then the grate that you see here and the reflection of the light on the wall. It's a really, I think, a great photograph. This was taken by Rick Borchert. Am I saying that right? Are you here tonight, Rick? Still?
I am. I actually took this photo a few years ago. It was taken off of Printer's Alley.
Okay.
It started to rain, so I ducked into the garage to get out of the rain and saw this image and had to capture it.
It's great. I mean, it's so timeless. I mean, that's one you've got to be really happy about. Like everything came together just right there. Just again, compositionally and the lighting, the textures, like it's a great photograph, and one, that certainly stood out. Just a couple more here, folks. This is Rick Weiss's picture, Barn and Silo. Again, this is just one of those beautiful compositions. Everything is, in my mind, just right. The way that you've chosen to frame this, and the lighting, and just the scenery itself is great. It's one of them, just seeing the reflection of the barn and the silo in the water, where you've got the horizon line. It's or the land line, I guess I should say in this case. It's just a really pleasing photograph. And again, one of those that just makes me just kind of take a deep breath and relax. And it's a really pretty picture. Where was it taken, Rick, if you're on the call? Oh, we may have lost him. Okay, well, here's one more that Rick took. This is another example. We've seen a couple of these where we're trying to we may be isolated in a building, but we're staying connected through our phones and our devices, sometimes even allowing ourselves to stick our legs out the window, get some fresh air that way. Then there are two pictures by Susan Harrell. This one, I believe, in Nashville. Just we've seen a lot of pictures of that just in general around town, but this was a great example to me of the combination of the blue sky with the clouds and the brick facade, and even those the windows on the side, just the texture and the color worked really well to me. And then this picture just made me laugh, do your part, stay apart, and the little hay guy wearing the mask. I just thought it spoke to the times very much, but brought some levity to it as well, which we don't always see. Susan, are you on the phone, on the call? Okay, and then last but not least, two photographs by Wayne Thomas. This was a photograph that I picked just because I thought it was, an attractive photograph. Well, the composition was strong and good, but then when I read the title, saw it was modified phase 2, I took a closer look and I realized, oh wait, actually, this is a diner or a bar, and there's only one person there, and that again kind of spoke to the present moment. And then this photograph, I was kind of surprised that these were by the same photographer. Again, something that I just saw as being a really formal picture. Maybe I would have put this next to Kay Ramming's Closed if I were doing, just an exploration of shapes. But one that I think is really well done. So Wayne, if you're on the line, if there's anything you want to share about these two pictures, or maybe is one more representative of your work than another?
Probably this one is probably more like what you would normally see from me. This was shot down at the Sloss Furnace in Birmingham.
Okay.
And the first one was shot just around the corner from my house. It's a bar called the Never Never. It's on 4th Avenue South in Wedgwood, Houston.
Okay.
Yeah. And I noticed one day that the sun like the way the sun set behind the building. So I walked around the corner and shot that one afternoon.
It definitely, you got it just the right moment. And it's, you know, it's a really, it's a great shot. I really
Thank
like
you.
it. And having to kind of hunt for the people in there, I thought was really interesting, even though at first we're catching just that moment when the sun is setting, but then seeing the folks too is great. And this picture, I think, is, you know, there's a lot going on there, and it's a pleasure to kind of have our eyes travel through the different shapes and colors. So folks, I'm sorry I talked way too long. Emily, you told me to stick to my time and I didn't, so I apologize about that, but thanks for those of you who did hang on. And again, let me stop sharing my screen here. You know, it's so great to get to know more creatives here in the Nashville community, and we're also grateful for your work now, I think even more than ever, and keep it up. And I'll do a little plug, come to the Frist, see some artwork that's being made by other people. When you get a chance, we're open, and we'd love to have you.
Well, Katie and Carrie, both of you, we just appreciate this so much. This was just rich, and we're very grateful. Everybody's like, we're seeing good comments in here. And I just feel like there's a lot that we're all going to be taking home with us to think through. One of the things I think we all appreciate is hearing from both of you, formal and the formal aspects of each individual piece and show together, as well as the themes, the stories, the meanings, and it plus the time to really sit with each photo. Even when we go to JCC and see the photos, we hardly spend an entire 2 minutes on each one, because gosh, we got what do we got to do? But we got to gotta look at our watch and head on out there. Anybody else want to add something? Don't forget to unmute if you do.
Well, I very much appreciate both of you sharing your process, which is what I always like from artists anyway, is what is the creative process that you're thinking about, feeling, and it was wonderfully articulated by both of you. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to say I appreciated your inquiring about the usual practice of people. I found that really interesting in terms of, you know, I mean, we kind of know each other, but it's like, and we see each other's work, but to, you know, to inquire about the practice, that brought out a whole different dimension in one sense. So thank you.
Yes, and we do actually learn so much about each other on these opportunities. So looking forward to doing that some more. And thank you all. Thank you for the folks who contributed to the show and came tonight. I mean, I just feel like I'm very enriched. There's a lot to think about, and I know everybody's hungry who hadn't eaten yet. So I'm going to say thank you and sayonara, and let me know, you guys, if you want to come to the planning for next year, if you haven't already gotten that email from me. So thanks again, everybody. I'm going to.
Thank you. Nice
Thank
to meet you.
you. Enjoyed it.
Nice to meet you,
Nice
Katie.
to meet you all.
Good night.
Yeah.
Thank you, and see you soon, everyone.
Thank you guys so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.